It was a quiet afternoon at the Riverside Public Market, the kind of place where families came to relax, tourists snapped pictures, and street musicians filled the air with soft guitar melodies. Among the crowd walked an older man in a simple black jacket, dark sunglasses, and a calm, almost meditative presence. No security. No entourage. No cameras. Just Steven Seagal, enjoying a peaceful moment away from the world that once shouted his name. He moved slowly, hands behind his back, admiring a handmade wooden craft on a vendor's table when suddenly, thud! A loud bump shook his shoulder. Steven turned gently and found himself facing a tall, broad, tattoo-covered young man. He wasn't alone. Two of his friends trailed behind him, laughing like they owned the place. The bully glanced at Steven with irritation instead of apology. "Watch where you're walking, old man," he snapped. Steven offered a soft nod. "No harm done. It was an accident." But the bully wasn't looking for peace. He smirked, stepping closer as if trying to intimidate the calm stranger in front of him. "You think that's an excuse? You bumped into me." Nearby shoppers paused mid-step. The vendor froze. A couple of people quietly raised their phones, sensing this encounter was heading somewhere dangerous. Steven took a slow breath. "I didn't come here for trouble. Let's both move on." The bully laughed loudly, attracting more attention. "Move on? You're shaking already. Look at you." But Steven wasn't shaking. He was simply still, the kind of stillness that comes from years of discipline, training, and wisdom. But the bully couldn't see it. Instead, he shoved Steven lightly on the chest, testing him like a predator poking prey. Steven didn't react. "Not yet." Crowd murmurs grew louder. "Who messes with an old guy like that? Why's he provoking him? Someone record this." The bully leaned in, nose inches from Steven's face. "What are you gonna do about it?" he taunted. Steven looked him straight in the eyes, calm, unshaken, unreadable. And in that tense silence, one thing became clear. This bully had no idea who he had just laid hands on, and even less idea who Steven's son really was. Audience hook. What Steven said next made everyone freeze. The air around the market tightened as the bully stepped even closer, his chest puffed out like he was trying to prove something. Steven stood still, centered, unmoving, the exact opposite of the chaos forming around him. His calmness didn't defuse the tension, it amplified it. "Say something, old man," the bully barked loudly, leaning in. "Or are you just gonna stand there shaking?" Steven spoke gently, voice low and controlled. "I don't want to hurt your pride. Or your friend's afternoon. Let's end this peacefully." The bully's friends snickered. One of them lifted his phone, recording every second. "Oh look, he thinks he's a wise monk or something," the friend laughed. Steven didn't react. Years of discipline had taught him never to rise to meaningless provocation. But the bully mistook silence for fear. "You better speak up," he growled, grabbing Steven by the jacket. "Or I'll make you." Several people gasped. Mothers pulled their children closer. Vendors stepped back, watching the confrontation unfold with uneasy eyes. Steven gently removed the bully's hand from his jacket. "I'll say it once more," he said evenly. "Walk away. Anger will only take you somewhere you don't want to be." The calm delivery, steady, almost teacher-like, infuriated the bully. "You don't get to tell me what to do," he shouted. And then, in a moment that froze the entire market, the bully raised his hand and slapped Steven Seagal across the face. A sharp, echoing crack tore through the space. Phones shot upward instantly. Dozens recording. Dozens more watching, jaws open. The bully stepped back with a grin of victory, as if he had just defeated someone worth defeating. "That's what happens when you disrespect me," he announced loudly, pointing a finger at Steven. "Now what, huh? You gonna cry?" But Steven didn't touch his face. Didn't stumble. Didn't even blink. He simply stood there, breathing deeply, not in fear, but in disappointment. Crowd whispers intensified. "Did he just hit him? Why isn't the older guy fighting back? Man, he's either crazy or incredibly patient." The bully, seeing no reaction, became even more aggravated. "What's wrong?" he yelled. "Cat got your tongue? Want another slap?" Steven finally raised his head, eyes lifting slowly toward the bully. For the first time, a hint of steel appeared in his expression. Calm steel, not anger. I warned you, Steven said quietly, because I didn't want you to suffer the consequences of your own choices. The crowd leaned in. The bully scoffed. Consequences? What consequences? You're an old nobody. Steven didn't argue, didn't shout, didn't insult back. He simply said one sentence that sent chills through those close enough to hear. You have no idea what you've just triggered. The bully blinked, confused. His friends looked at each other, unsure whether this was a threat, a warning, or something deeper. Triggered? What, your arthritis? The bully mocked, trying to regain dominance. But underneath Steven's steady voice, underneath the stillness of his hands, underneath the calm of his breathing, something enormous was shifting. Not because of who he was, but because of who was watching him, and who was already on their way. Engagement break, optional voiceover line. Have you ever seen a bully underestimate the wrong person? Comment your city below. The slap echoed through the Riverside Market long after the bully's hand had dropped back to his side. It was the kind of moment that made time slow down, a single act of arrogance that no one could take back. People who had been casually strolling moments earlier now stood frozen, their attention glued to the confrontation unfolding in front of them. Steven didn't move. Not even a twitch. If anything, he looked calmer than before, as if the slap had awakened something inside him. Not anger, not fear, but clarity. The bully mistook this stillness as weakness. Most bullies do. Oh, so you're just gonna stare at me now, he taunted loudly, looking around for approval. This guy's pathetic. Someone get him a wheelchair. A few nervous laughs rose from his friends, but the crowd stayed silent. They weren't laughing. They weren't impressed. They were watching something they didn't fully understand yet. A woman near the fruit stall whispered, "Why isn't he reacting? Is he okay?" An elderly man shook his head. "It's not that he's scared. Look at his body language. That man is in control." But the bully couldn't see it. His ego was too loud, too hungry, too desperate to prove himself in front of his boys. He stepped even closer to Steven, their faces inches apart. "You got anything to say, Grandpa?" he spat. "Or is your jaw too stiff from old age?" Steven finally blinked. Just once. Then he exhaled through his nose, slow, steady, the way a martial artist centers himself before a necessary decision. He wasn't planning to fight. But he was preparing for something. "I told you," Steven said quietly, "anger blinds judgment. You should walk away." But the bully didn't like advice. Especially not from a man he believed he had already humiliated. He shoved Steven again. This time harder. Steven stepped back half a stride, absorbing the impact without resistance. Steven's friend, a quiet man who had been browsing a nearby stall, rushed forward with alarm. "Steven, let's just go," he said urgently. "He's not worth it. Please." Steven lifted one hand slightly, signaling him to stay out of it. "It's okay," Steven murmured. "Some lessons are learned the hard way." The bully heard the word lesson and snapped even harder. "Lesson? Who do you think you are?" he barked, voice rising again. "You think you can teach me something? You're a nobody." A ripple ran through the crowd. People exchanged glances, shaking their heads. "He really has no idea," one teenager muttered. Another whispered, "If that's really Steven Seagal, this guy is done." But the bully, fully consumed by his ego, paid no attention to anything except the older man standing calmly before him. "You've got one more chance to walk away," Steven said, his voice still composed. "I promise you, this won't end the way you think." That only made the bully grin wider. "Oh yeah. And what are you gonna do if I don't?" Steven didn't answer. Instead, he looked around at the crowd, noticing the fear in some eyes, the curiosity in others. This wasn't about pride. It wasn't about proving strength. It was about preventing unnecessary harm. But the bully interpreted the silence as surrender. He stepped aside, raised both arms, and shouted to everyone. "This old fool thinks he's some kind of warrior. Watch me put him on the ground. Phones lifted higher. Live streams began. Comments flooded in. The bully lunged forward, grabbing Steven by the front of his jacket with both hands, shaking him aggressively. "You listening now?" he shouted. "Or do I need to smack you again?" Steven looked straight into his eyes. Deep, focused, unwavering. He spoke slowly, the kind of slow that comes from a man who has lived 1,000 battles and knows exactly where this one is heading. "You've made your choice," he said. "But the consequences aren't mine to deliver." The bully frowned, confused. "What consequences? I'm standing right here." But before he could finish, his two friends stiffened, noticing something Steven had already sensed minutes ago. A group of people on the far end of the market, all wearing earpieces, had paused their steps. Their eyes were fixed on Steven. Their hands hovered near the inside of their jackets. They were watching, waiting, not for the bully, but for Steven. The bully's friends looked nervous, but he was too caught up in his own bravado to notice anything unusual. He shoved Steven once more, even harder. "That's right. Stay quiet. You can't do a thing." Steven finally cut him off. "You're wrong," he said calmly. "But I'm not the one you should be afraid of." The crowd went silent. The bully blinked. The earth beneath this moment shifted, subtly, quietly, but enough for the audience watching to feel it in their bones. Something huge was coming. Something the bully had absolutely no idea about. And his worst mistake wasn't the slap, or the insults, or the pushing. His worst mistake was assuming Steven Seagal was alone. The market had grown unnaturally quiet. Even the street musicians, sensing the tension in the air, slowly lowered their guitars. People who had been casually browsing moments earlier now stood shoulder to shoulder, forming a loose ring around the confrontation. Everyone could feel something was off. Something bigger than just an argument. Something the bully still failed to see. The bully's last shove made Steven take a single step back, his boots scraping lightly against the pavement. He didn't raise his hands, didn't defend himself, didn't react with anger. But his posture, his breath, his composure. It was the kind of calm that comes right before a storm. A teenage girl near the smoothie stand squinted at Steven, tilting her head. "Guys, wait, doesn't he look familiar?" she whispered. Her friend frowned. "Familiar how?" "I swear, my dad watches his movies." "That's—" She paused, eyes widening. "Is that Steven Seagal?" Her friend's jaw dropped. "No way." But once the seed was planted, others started noticing too. A man wearing a veteran's cap stepped forward, his eyes narrowing in recognition. That stance, those shoulders, that face. "I'd know that man anywhere," he murmured. "That is Steven Seagal." Whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. "Are you serious? That's really him? Oh my God, this idiot just slapped Steven Seagal? No way he survives this." The bully glanced around, noticing the sudden shift in energy, the startled expressions, the hushed murmurs, but still clueless. "What's everyone looking at?" he barked. "Yeah, record it. Record how I handled this clown." But his friends weren't laughing anymore. Not even close. One of them tugged at his sleeve, voice trembling. "Bro, I think we messed up. That man looks exactly like—" "Like who?" the bully snapped. "Some washed-up karate instructor?" "No," the friend whispered, panic rising. "Like Steven Seagal. The Steven Seagal." The bully blinked, then burst out laughing. "Steven Seagal? The Steven Seagal," he mocked loudly. "You mean the action movie guy who breaks arms for fun? Yeah, right. Why would he be walking around a market like a normal dude?" But the friend didn't look convinced. "Look at him. Look at how calm he is. Look at how he moves." Others in the crowd nodded silently. "He hasn't even lifted a finger. He's giving this guy a chance. That's definitely him. No ordinary person stays that calm. Man, this bully is digging his own grave." But the bully crossed his arms, scoffing at the idea. "If that's Steven Seagal," he said loudly, "then I'm the President of the United States." Steven finally spoke, voice steady and unbothered. Names don't matter. Actions do. The bully smirked, misinterpreting the line as deflection. Yeah, that's what a fraud would say. A few gasps rippled through the audience. One woman stepped forward carefully. Sir, please, tell me something. She lowered her voice. Are you Steven Seagal? Steven simply gave a small nod. Not dramatic. Not proud. Just honest. And that tiny nod hit the crowd like an explosion. Oh my God, it is him. He actually admitted it. No way. This idiot slapped Steven Seagal? The bully froze for a moment, then waved it off like it didn't matter. Even if you are Steven Seagal, he shouted, I don't care. That doesn't mean you can disrespect me. A man from the crowd muttered. He was the one disrespecting you, genius. Steven didn't argue. He didn't need to. The truth was unfolding on its own. The bully took a step closer, lowering his voice now that the truth was sinking in. So what if you're Steven Seagal? He snarled. Movie stars don't scare me. Steven looked him in the eyes, calm, patient, unmoved. I'm not trying to scare you, he said softly. I'm trying to prevent you from ruining your own life. That line, that one line, sent a chill through the entire crowd. People exchanged uneasy glances. What does he mean by that? Ruin his own life. Did something happen we don't know about? Why did those men with earpieces stop walking earlier? The whispers grew louder, more urgent. The bully swallowed hard. Something in Steven's tone shook him, not fear, but uncertainty. It was the uncertainty of a man who suddenly realized there might be consequences far beyond fists and bravado. Steven's friend approached again, pulling him gently aside. Steven, should I call your son? He asked quietly. Steven didn't need to answer. His eyes flicked momentarily toward the edge of the market, toward the men watching. They had already called him. And he was already on his way. The bully, still clueless, puffed out his chest one more time. You think someone's coming to save you? He mocked. But Steven didn't smile. Didn't flinch. Didn't reply. Because somewhere beyond the crowd, beyond the market, beyond the bully's limited imagination, a government vehicle had already turned onto Riverside Street. Lights off. Black-tinted windows. The Chief of Homeland Security wasn't coming because Steven needed help. He was coming because someone had dared lay a hand on his father. And the bully was seconds away from learning the price of that mistake. The bully stood in front of Steven, chest puffed out, trying desperately to hold on to the dominance he believed he still had. But the tone of the crowd had changed. What was once amusement had turned into a heavy silence, the kind that falls when everyone knows something terrible is about to happen. Yet the bully, blinded by his own ego, couldn't read the room. You think I'm scared because a few people think you're some movie hero, he barked, pointing a shaky finger in Steven's face. You're nothing to me. Nothing. But the tremble in his voice betrayed him. For the first time since the confrontation began, he wasn't sure he was winning. Steven didn't move. Didn't advance. Didn't raise his hands in defense. He simply looked at the bully with the same calm, unreadable expression, a look that made the bully even more furious. You keep talking in riddles, the bully scoffed. Consequences this, consequences that. What, you gonna summon your Hollywood stunt team? A few people chuckled nervously, but most kept their eyes glued to Steven, waiting, sensing, feeling something shifting in the air. Steven inhaled slowly, grounding himself the way only a lifelong martial artist could. His voice, when he spoke, was no longer soft. It carried a weight, a depth, a warning carved from decades of discipline. You've crossed a line today, he said, his tone resonating through the crowd. Not because you hit me, but because you let your anger make choices your future cannot afford. The bully blinked, mouth opening slightly as if to respond, but nothing came out. Steven continued, his voice now commanding enough to silence even the murmurs around them. I gave you chances to walk away. More than you deserved. Not to protect myself. He paused, eyes narrowing just slightly. But to protect you from what comes next. Gasps flickered through the crowd. What does that mean? What's coming next? Is this guy in trouble? The bully shook his head, trying to regain control. Protect me. From who? You, he sneered, stepping closer again. You think you're special? I run this area. People listen to me here. Steven tilted his head slightly. That's where you're wrong. No one is listening to you anymore. The bully glanced around, and for the first time, truly noticed the stares. Not admiration, not fear, but pity. His friends refused to meet his eyes. People in the crowd shook their heads slowly. A mother whispered to her son, "That's the moment," he realized. But the bully's pride refused to surrender. "Oh, now you're gonna lecture me," he snapped. "If you're really Steven Seagal, then show me something. Fight back. Come on." Steven's jaw tightened, the first visible sign of irritation. His eyes sharpened, not in anger, but in firmness. "I don't need to fight you," he said calmly. "And trust me, you don't want me to." The bully laughed loudly, but it sounded forced. "Why?" "Because you're a celebrity," he mocked. "Because people used to watch your movies." Steven slowly shook his head. "No. Because I'm a father." That line landed like a punch to the chest. Steven took one deliberate step toward the bully. The crowd leaned in as if pulled by invisible strings. "And the man you raised your hand against today." Another step. "The man you insulted." Another. "The man you laid hands on without cause." Steven's eyes locked onto the bully's. "His son is not someone you want to provoke." The bully's smirk began to crack. "What son?" he muttered. Steven didn't look away. "My son," he said steadily. "The Chief of Homeland Security." A wave of shock tore through the crowd. "What? No way. Oh, he's finished." He slapped the father of a Homeland Security chief. The bully stumbled a step back. What are you talking about? Homeland, what?" Steven didn't answer. He didn't need to, because in that moment, faint but unmistakable, everyone heard it. The distant rumble of heavy engines. Growing louder. Closer. Faster. The bully whipped his head toward the sound. SUVs. Black. Tinted. Government plates. Racing toward the market entrance. Crowd gasped in unison. Steven spoke one last line, quiet but thunderous. "This is your last chance to walk away." But the bully was frozen. Paralyzed. Unable to move. Unable to undo the slap. The shove. The insults. Unable to undo the biggest mistake of his life. The SUVs screeched to a stop. Agents poured out, fast, focused, armed. And the bully realized. He hadn't just underestimated Steven Seagal. He had provoked a storm he never even knew existed. The black SUVs screeched to a stop at the entrance of the Riverside Market, tires grinding against the pavement. Every conversation, every sound, every breath in the area seemed to freeze. The doors flew open simultaneously, and heavily equipped federal agents poured out like a wave of silent thunder. Their movements were sharp, purposeful, coordinated. These weren't local police. Not mall security. Not rent-a-cops. These were federal tactical agents, and they weren't here for a random patrol. They were here for someone. The bully's bravado shattered instantly. What is this?" he whispered, backing up. His friends abandoned him, melting into the crowd like they never knew him. Agents moved with swift precision, forming a perimeter around the confrontation zone. Their hands hovered near their holsters, not drawing, but ready. The crowd parted on instinct, stepping back in fear and awe. One agent, taller than the rest, moved to the front. His voice boomed. "Mr. Seagal, are you safe?" The bully's knees nearly buckled. He said, "Mr. Seagal," with respect, with authority, with urgency. All eyes snapped to Steven, calm, steady, unbroken. Steven nodded once. "I'm fine." The lead agent glanced sharply at the bully, who instantly felt like his soul was being weighed. "Is this the man who assaulted you, sir?" the agent asked. The bully's heart squeezed in terror. Assault, on Steven Seagal, in front of federal agents. His future flashed before his eyes like rapid-fire images. Handcuffs. Courtrooms. Jail. But Steven calmly raised a hand, stopping the agent from stepping forward. "Not yet," Steven said quietly. "He made a mistake. Let my son speak to him first." The moment Steven said, "my son," every agent straightened, as if the air itself demanded attention. The bully gulped. Son? What son?" He didn't have to wait long. From the second SUV, a man stepped out, mid-40s, sharp suit under a tactical vest, badge glinting against his chest. His presence was commanding, his expression carved from granite. He walked with purpose, with authority, with a storm behind his eyes. Crowd gasped as whispers shot through like electricity. "That's him. No way. That's Steven Seagal's son. He's the chief." The man approached Steven first, placing a firm hand on his father's shoulder. "Dad, are you hurt?" Steven shook his head. "No. Just disappointed." That one sentence, that one subtle disappointment, hurt more than any punch. The son's jaw clenched. He turned slowly toward the bully, who now looked like a child caught stealing in front of the entire world. "You," the chief said, pointing at him without raising his voice. The bully flinched as if struck. "Step forward." The bully shook his head rapidly. I didn't know who he was. I swear, I didn't know." The chief stepped closer, towering over him. "Did you need to know who he was?" he asked coldly, "before deciding to attack an innocent man?" The bully stuttered. "And no, I thought, he bumped into me." A few people in the crowd scoffed. The chief didn't. "He bumped into you," he repeated slowly. "And your response was to slap him? To threaten him? To surround him?" The bully's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know." The chief cut him off. "You didn't need to know. You needed to be decent." Silence swallowed the entire market. Even the agents paused. Steven stepped forward now, gently touching his son's arm, a father calming his storm. "Son," he said softly, "humiliation is punishment enough. He's a young man who let ego rule him. Let him learn, not suffer." The crowd murmured in shock. Steven was forgiving him? The chief inhaled, forcing his anger down. He looked into his father's eyes, the same eyes that had taught him strength, patience, and discipline for decades. "If that's what you want," he said quietly, "I'll honor it." He turned to the bully one last time. "You owe this man your freedom," he stated. "And you owe him an apology." The bully nodded rapidly, tears welling. "I'm sorry," he blurted out, voice cracking. "I'm so sorry, sir. Mr. Seagal. I didn't know, I swear." Steven held up a calm hand. "Knowing my name is not the lesson," he said. "Respect should not depend on identity." The bully bowed his head, trembling. Agents stepped aside, standing down. The tension slowly dissolved as the crowd exhaled for the first time in minutes. Steven turned away gently as if the entire event was just another moment in a long life of teaching lessons without raising a single fist. But for the bully, this moment would follow him forever. He had picked a fight with a man he didn't understand, and discovered the truth only when it was far too late. News of the market confrontation didn't just spread, it exploded. By evening, every major platform was flooded with clips of the bully slapping Steven Seagal, the agents arriving in black SUVs, and the dramatic moment the Chief of Homeland Security stepped out to defend his father. Headlines appeared everywhere. "Bully picks wrong target. Slaps Steven Seagal. Homeland Security Chief rushes to protect father. Instant karma in public market." Within hours, millions of people had watched the video. Some laughed at the bully's arrogance. Some admired Steven's calmness. But everyone agreed on one thing. Steven Seagal didn't need to throw a single punch to win. His dignity alone destroyed the bully's ego. The bully, meanwhile, spent the rest of the evening hiding in his apartment. His phone vibrated relentlessly, not with support, but with messages from people mocking him, scolding him, and reminding him of the moment he wished he could erase. His friends had turned their backs. His reputation evaporated. He had become a global symbol of instant karma. But strangely, this humiliation wasn't the worst part. The worst part was replaying Steven's words in his mind. Respect should not depend on identity. That line cut deeper than any punch ever could. The next morning, Steven Seagal walked into a small press conference arranged by the city. He didn't arrive with fanfare or security. He didn't want revenge or compensation. He simply wanted to speak. With cameras rolling, he stepped to the microphone. "What happened yesterday," he began calmly, "was not just about disrespect toward me. It was about something bigger. We live in a world where anger often speaks louder than reason, and where pride destroys more lives than fists ever could." Reporters nodded, scribbling his words as he continued. "Strength isn't about overpowering someone. Strength is choosing restraint when you have every reason not to. That's the lesson I've tried to teach my son, and the lesson I hope others learned yesterday." Social media lit up again. Hashtags trended, #respect, #instant karma, #Steven Seagal. The bully watched the press conference from home, tears silently rolling down his cheeks. Steven hadn't humiliated him in return. He hadn't insulted him. He hadn't demanded he be punished. Instead, he taught him a lesson the bully realized he desperately needed. Later that day, he gathered the courage to return to the market. Not as a tough guy. Not with swagger. Just as a humbled young man wanting to make things right. He found Steven speaking with a vendor and approached slowly. Steven turned and met his eyes. No anger. No resentment. Just calm acknowledgement. "I came to thank you," the bully said, voice trembling, "for giving me a chance to learn instead of ruining my life." Steven nodded gently. "Everyone deserves a chance to grow, even those who make mistakes. And I'm sorry," the bully added. "Truly sorry. You didn't deserve what I did." Steven extended a hand, surprising him. "You earned your lesson. Now earn your better future." The bully shook his hand, overwhelmed. It was the handshake of forgiveness, something he would never forget. As the sun set over the market, Steven walked away quietly, disappearing into the crowd as simply as he had arrived. No entourage. No spotlight. Just a father, a man of peace, teaching the world that real power is restraint. The cameras had captured the chaos, but the world remembered the calm. And the final message echoed across millions of screens. If you believe respect should be given to all, not just the powerful, type respect in the comments.